Hi everyone, Brian Isaacs here today. I'm speaking with Jeremy Adams, a versatile and passionate storyteller known for bringing action, heart, and humor to both comics and animation. From his acclaimed run on Flash to his work on Green Lantern and DC animated projects, Jeremy has crafted stories that resonate with fans. We're going to discuss his creative journey, the challenges of writing these iconic characters, and what exciting products he has in store. Jeremy, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate
Oh,
it.
I'm excited to be here. Very excited.
Now, it was announced last week that you received a multi-year contract with DC Comics. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. I'm thrilled.
So, now you're going to be writing. You just came off a successful run of Aquaman, and you're going to be doing the new Aquaman series. You're going to be doing a Green Lantern that's focusing on Hal Jordan and co-writing the Green Lantern Corps. How do you find time to juggle all those?
Oh my gosh. It's such a passion that it doesn't feel necessarily like work. I really do have a great time just sitting down and pushing play in my forehead and watching the stories play out. But yeah, Green Lantern Corps with Morgan, Aquaman, doing Flash Gordon at Mad Cave still, and it's a lot, but like I find that my appetite is growing even bigger,
Wow.
and my wife laughs at me because she knows that when I start to get busy, I actually get like crave more. I become a lot more efficient in doing work, because I'm just stuck in
Right.
the mindset of like, okay, I got to do this. And for me at least, I know that writing out ideas generate more ideas. So it's kind of a never-ending cycle of like, oh, and then what if this happened? And then what if this happened? And my biggest problem is feeling like I'm never going to be able to get all the ideas out, you know. Yeah, it's really thrilling. I'm very excited about it. Comics is something that I've never known a time in my life where I didn't have comics,
Right.
and it was something that I definitely was. I've been, trying to break into in some form or another for a long time. So I'm fairly new at it, but I have been enjoying it. I mean, just the heck out of it.
This isn't your first time scripting characters for DC. You've done a
Right.
bunch of the animated movies, Batman Soul of the Dragon, Battle of the Super Sons, Teen Titans Go versus Teen Titans, as well as other properties like Lego, The Thunderbirds, Scooby Doo, and my favorite episode of Supernatural, the
Oh,
Scooby Natural episode.
yeah, yeah.
Um, is it? Do you find a difference in writing like a movie, TV script opposed to writing for comics?
Oh yeah, drastically. I mean, the interesting thing is, I would say that the difference between animation and comics are not as far off as maybe the difference between animation, comics, and live action.
Okay,
Uh, even when we did Scooby Natural, Jim Krieg and I, like, there's a moment in the script where we literally go, "Hey, this script's about to change. Don't freak out," because we've got to write it for the artist.
right.
And so that in animation and comic books, I wonder if that's why I've had at least some good collaborations with the artists, is because my most of my career has been in animation where I'm writing for artists, storyboard
Right.
guys, producers and stuff, versus live action where I had got a note once, why did you write out the entire fight scene? And I'm like, I like doing that, and also, I was thinking about storyboard guys. Um, so yeah, they're not dissimilar, but in terms of scope, in terms of I feel like comics have much more a different pace to them than a screenplay does. The page turn is so critical in a comic book, and I really write to that page turn. And I will rip apart a script just to get a page turn, or I'll do something terrible like go, 8 panels on this like just to get the dramatic turn because versus in comic books or in screenwriting, live action screenwriting, you're kind of the act breaks are very organic with like commercial breaks, especially
Right.
network television, right? And so you kind of play toward that cliffhanger, so you come back after the commercial break. In movies, there are bigger moments, but you also save those bigger moments for the act breaks, which are more extended. I know we're in the weeds about it, but like with comic books, I feel like you can have many more dramatic moments, or at least you can play to that. The reveals I think are much more interesting. And I'm not perfect at it, and I'm still learning, and maybe I'm doing it too much. But like I am notorious for like that one panel on the odd page will be like, oh really, Aquaman, and then you have to turn and you're like, oh, it's blah blah blah. Uh, uh, but there's something about the way that your eye shifts as you turn the page and the anticipation, even if it's small, that I think is really interesting. I've done a couple vertical comics for Marvel, and I hadn't really got the hang of it because that's a whole different thing. The scrolling up, and I know
Okay.
there's got to be a method to it. My brain was like, okay, how do you do this? Because your reveal now is the top down,
Right.
versus seeing the whole page. Um, anyways, I'm sorry, I could talk about that
It's
weird
okay.
stuff. You know,
I imagine like comics is a little different because I took a screenwriting class way back when, and the first thing that was drilled into my head is if you don't see it on screen, it doesn't happen. While in comics, you can have that backstory with like word balloons or the character's thoughts or side things. I imagine that might be a little different.
it might be, but uh, I generally my feeling about screenwriting classes, there's often a lot of times where people say you have to do it this way, and you never have to do it that way. There's a
Right.
great movie called Adaptation. I don't know if you ever saw it,
Oh yeah,
but
I did.
there's that one scene where they have the guy that's supposed to be the very famous screenwriting professor, and I forget his name, but it's played by Brian Cox. And there's this great voiceover by Nicolas Cage, and he's in his head about a bunch of stuff. And then Brian Cox's character like it breaks in. It's like I never ever have a voiceover, and just the way that they took that idea of like, hey, these are the rules, and it's like, no, there are no rules. Um, you can. I've read. One of my first jobs was doing coverage for a producer, and that was very inspiring to me because I was like, oh, I could do this because I read scripts that were all over the map, that were written in very different ways. Though there is a more structured way to format a
Right.
traditionally a screenplay, which is
Right.
great, but comic books there's not, which was mind boggling to me. There is no one way to do it. The first script that I ever got was a Jeff Johns script,
Hmm.
and Tim Sheridan and I both got those, and then we kind of took his form, and then my editor would be like, "Can you add this? Can you add this?" So now I have a pretty hefty document version of these comic scripts that I turn in. Uh, but Yeah, I always kind of buck when somebody says, "Oh, you can't do that," because I do stuff in screenwriting that is wacky sometimes, and same with comic book writing. And you're always trying to figure out how to do it different and
Right.
interesting.
I just want to say, out of your animated stuff that you've done, that Blue Beetle short where you just simply captured the Spider-Man 67.
Oh my gosh.
Oh,
I
how that was
I
hilarious.
I sat down with Jim Krieg and Rick Morales, and I was only really responsible for coming up with the story, and I did like the outline for it. This girl Jenny Keene did the script, and but Jim is an obsessive about the old Spider-Man series. And in fact, if you see, he has this amazing college film. His college film is called Viva la Spider-Man. which is a live action, like a direct version, a live action version of the old Spider-Man. And so we sat down at a sushi place in Burbank, and we're just like, what if we did it like Spider-Man? What if we did the weird cell things and like and like their theme song and I'm a such a Ted Cord nut, and having the question in there because obviously one of my first books I ever bought was Charlton Blue Beetle #1, where it had a backup with the question. So
Right.
it's very ripped off from that, and like a lot of the Charlton characters. But that was really really fun. That was really fun. And Rick, who I've worked with on like over like 10 movies, it's always one of those things where he giggles because he will write something, or I'll write something and I'll turn it in, and he plays the cards close to his chest because he's been the huge driving force behind Creature Commandos too. And then he'll go, "Hey Jeremy, you want to see something?" And then he'll show me, and he'll just be and I'll just be astounded at how much better it is than anything that I thought it was going to be. He did have Mortal Kombat, like Mortal Kombat, Scorpion's Revenge. I remember we turned it in. We had gotten notes that it was too violent, and we're like, "What? That's crazy!" And so we like toned it down. But then Rick obviously went in and just completely plussed it up. So when he showed us the scene of just extreme violence, Jim and I were just screaming like, "Oh my gosh!" So that's it, that's by the way, and that's the fun thing to do, not just in animation, but comic books. Working with collaborators and seeing them take your words and making them so much better is it's so fun. It's
Right.
so fun to be able to get like every day I'm getting pages in from either John Timms, Fernando Passarin, or Zermanico, and they're astounding. I mean, they're just astounding. It's just perplexing to me that they could do anything like the art that they do, especially from my scribblings,
All right. Tough question. Not trying to get you to say spoilers, but what do we have to look forward to with Aquaman, Green Lantern, and Green Lantern Corps?
So Green Lantern, I'll start with Green Lantern Corps. We set up this whole fractured spectrum thing where the emotional spectrum of the Green Lantern universe, the central power batteries for all those different colored batteries have been destroyed. So
Right.
people in the universe, because that energy is just out there unfocused, people of the universe are starting to manifest those emotions, and left unchecked, left without the willpower to control them, those people become basically volatile bombs. But there's also these splinter spectrums that have been created. And really, the first one is the Sorrow Lantern, a
Yep.
piece of not necessarily a part of one in particular color, but like a melding of colors or a fracture of the spectrum that's manifested. And we have this character named Nathan Broom that's the sorrow, and he just is so sad and so upset that he's manifested this thing. Part of it, I've kind of played with the idea that part of it was because potentially he was in proximity to somebody that manifested part of the emotional spectrum, which was Carol Ferris. So now he just wants to end. Sorry, he's like, I don't want any emotion. Well, he found the perfect guy to help him, which is Starbreaker, who is a emotional vampire. And this guy's like, hey, I'll help you, but you got to help me. Let's make a giant lantern, and I'll just get rid of that sorrow that you have in your body. So the Green Lantern Corps is trying to stop them, and issue 20, or I'm not sure if it's issue 20. I think it might be 21. We'll talk more about that. But we're leading up to a confrontation between not just Starbreaker, but Starbreaker and some of his brothers that have come
Wow.
come into this space, and that's going to be really wild as we get into that. That's going to be Green Lantern Corps. There's going to be a lot of that interplay between those two things. With Aquaman, I it's like I'm just not smart enough to do Atlantean politics. So I sent Aquaman on a journey to try to find Atlantis, and it has placed him in kind of a, I won't say another dimension, but in the DC world, we have a lot of primordial forces: the green, the red, the speed force, all that stuff. This is the blue, and it's around the idea that life cannot exist without water, and this water permeates the entire galaxy, and so there's a being called Dagon who has basically hoarded that power, and Aquaman, and in hoarding it, Atlantis has disappeared, and there's a mystery around that. So Aquaman's on the journey to find that, but he's stumbled across Arion, the Lord of Atlantis,
Right.
and the Lady of the Lake, and there's a prophecy about this being, this dark tide that will crash upon the shores of his enemies, and that uh, aspect is a mystery as well. And so Aquaman is, we're with him, and we're finding out a lot about how he was raised, and we're finding out that he is not somebody necessarily to be trifled with, and he has a big um, part to play, not just in this story with the blue, but potentially other pieces of the DC universe.
Yeah. Uh, yeah. Unfortunately, it's with the general public. Even with the movie, Aquaman is still seen as
Yeah,
the Joe, and Super Friends just kind of killed that.
I know it's always a struggle, I think, to fight against that in a way. But the Momoa stuff really helped. I
Yep.
think that I'm just trying to write some really badass high fantasy with Aquaman.
And he currently now has water manipulation powers.
Yeah, editorial. So after Absolute Power, this event that took place, a lot of superpowers were kind of mixed up in the
Mix
DC
up. Yeah.
universe. Yeah, and so they said, "Hey, we'd love to give Aquaman some of Mira's powers, like hydrokinesis." I was like, "Okay," but he's not. He's definitely not an expert at it, but he is learning how to use it in interesting ways. Very interestingly, very kind of remedial ways, but he's doing it very cleverly. He's not like Mira, who could wield water like Green Lantern wields
Right.
constructs. He's doing things like using them as blunt force objects, or doing them to do very, like I said, remedial things. It's like, I'm using this water to dry out this thing or to hit somebody, or it's not that intricate, but it's interesting, and it's super fun for me as a writer to try to figure out, okay, what could he do in this situation? How can he MacGyver his way out of situation? Because he doesn't have Poseidon's trident right now, and he has his limited powers that he does have, and so it's really fun. It's really fun to kind of put him in a different situation and see how he does.
Well, yeah, I really like the take on the Green Lantern, where you have Sinestro back, and it was still arrogant, but yet he proved why he thinks he's
Yeah,
the best, and that
yeah,
was that was a great moment. I really enjoyed that.
yeah. I really, Sinestro is an incredible character. Part of what I felt like my job was when I took over Green Lantern was to put it back into a somewhat of a status quo,
Mm-hmm.
but with little variations, obviously. Like, hey, the Guardians are there, but they're not exactly the same, and there's a mystery
Right.
to it. The central power battery is back on Oa. They are going out in the universe and being cops, but they have this added wrinkle of the emotional spectrum popping up and doing things. Um, but all that will come to a head pretty quick.
So I got to ask, who is your favorite character you would love to write? Is there anyone?
Yeah, Batman. I'm that kid. I mean, that's always going to be. for DC. I would love to write Superman. I've done them in animation, but doing them in comics just feels different. I also love, Ted Cord Blue Beetle, obviously. Um, I love the DC martial art universe. I adore that. All of them, whether it's Richard Dragon, Bronze Tiger, Cassandra Cain, Shiva, like I'm a nut for that stuff. Um, I also, somewhat probably too desperately have tried to convince them to let me do more in continuity books with superhero kids. I
Okay.
really, really would love to do that. So that would be something I'd really love to do.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, Jeremy, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with me today.
Yeah.
Honestly, can't wait to see where we go with Green Lantern and Aquaman. I'm looking forward to the ride myself.
Oh, cool,
Uh,
man. Thank you.
and for those watching this below, you'll find links to where Jeremy's socials are. And as always with us, remember to like and subscribe. So this way you know when the next one is live. Jeremy, again, thank you very much. Appreciate you
Thank you.
talking to me.
I appreciate it.
All right. Bye now.